There are shows with psychics.
And there are shows with doctors.
But there's no show like The Psychic and the Doc.
Your practical paranormal power unleashed.
This show synthesizes the talents of world-class medium Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer,
and street smart spiritualist, behavioral psychologist, Dr. Pat Baccili. All subjects are on the table and no topic is taboo. Inspiration, insight,
action, and fun as Mark Anthony connects callers with loved ones in spirit.
In tandem with Dr. Pat's fresh, no-nonsense, street smart, intuitive insights. And she is hilarious.
Extraordinary problems
require extraordinary solutions, which may come from this side
or the other side. This is The Psychic
and the Doc, and it starts now. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Anthony. This is The Psychic and the Doc. I'm the Psychic, and I'm here with my amazing co-host, the world-renowned behavioral psychologist, Dr. Pat Baccili. And we have a really great show for you today. It's October 13th, and the theme of this show is change or be changed.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Pat, we were talking before we came on the air about how the winds of change are definitely blowing through the world right now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would. I mean, we see it everywhere, and you have to ask yourself the question, how does it show up, Mark? And by the way, what a great show. We decided to do this show for everybody out there because this is a live call-in show. 1-800-930-2819. We really want to hear from you because we're talking about something that doesn't seem logical. And this is a statement I made a long time ago. I think it was in my school. And honestly, I didn't think it would bring up such controversy. And the statement is change or be changed. And whenever that comes up, it's like, no, you change, but that doesn't mean if I don't change, it doesn't mean that I will be changed. Yes, it does. And we're going to talk about the layers of that today. What do we mean? It plays out all over the place. It really does. It could play out from everything from the health and nutrition you put in your body about change or be changed from not looking at that and not paying attention that even what you don't know that you are absorbing is affecting you. And therefore, there's so many layers to this. But one of them gives you a sense of freedom. And the other one gives you a sense of victimization. And today we want to help people create a bridge, whatever that is, Mark. Isn't it true? That
yes.
Yeah, you want to talk about that a minute?
Certainly. Change is something that is inevitable, and the wise person is aware of that. And people think they don't change, but we're subjected to influences, to adverse situations that cause us to change whether we realize it or not. Now, I know as a psychic medium, I help people by facilitating communication with people here, with their loved ones in spirit. And, you know, we've dealt so much with helping people cope with loss. And that has got to be the ultimate life-changing event. When somebody you love dies, everything changes. And the question is, how are you going to navigate your change? And Dr. Pat, you've done so much work with people who have been victimized, women who've been brutalized, people coping with alcoholism. Let me ask you this, Dr. Pat, have you ever met a person that was an alcoholic or a drug addict that was a happy person?
Yes, when they're drinking.
yeah. And it inflicts unhappiness on everyone around.
No, that's true. But
that's funny.
I mean, it's really true. And you think about it. I mean, I'm not saying everybody is that. And am I really talking about true happiness? I'm not. But what I'm talking about is a persona that can come out. And come on, we all know that when you put a substance in your body, it's going to alter you. but it's going
Right.
to alter your outtake. It's going to alter what people see. But what's going on the inside, right? Now, I will say that there are a lot of people that they have a few drinks and you think, wow, I didn't even know that person could dance. Look at how happy they are. But what you don't know, and I'm not talking about the casual drinker, I'm not. And I just want to clarify for people, I'm not even talking about the casual marijuana user. What I'm talking about is understanding the parts of you that are gnawing at you, begging you to do something. They're begging you to do something, or they're begging you to stop doing something. Here's what I like. I think the world of psychology sometimes gets a little bit complicated when we really read all the papers and all that stuff. I studied with a gentleman, a doctor, who created the theoretical foundation for flow, right? Mihai, the theoretical foundation, studied it, brought it out so that we could understand it at the academic level, so that we could talk about it. But I'm telling you, there's only really two choices in this realm that we're in. But one of those choices, or both of those choices, we'll either have the tools to know what to do with it or we won't. So I think the fundamental difference, and I was holding up my book before the show, Og Mendino, right? Yes, the book is outdated. Yes, he probably talks about men mostly, but I don't know. He talks about God a lot. But I picked up this book again. I started to read it again, and he has these vows in the back of it. This is a guy that introspectively shares with you his story. You know what he calls it? The greatest, the book is called The Greatest Salesman in the World, Part 2, the end of the story. When you read this, Mark, the end of this man's story was the beginning of the next.
Wow.
Right? We have done this show because we want to help people either shut a door, open a door, or shut a door and then open a door.
Right.
We are not going to walk through the door for anyone. I have tried to do that for people in my life.
You can't. And you changed. See, you tried to do that. And it's like banging your head on that door instead of getting them through it. And you changed. Why? Because you can't make somebody be better.
Yeah.
They have to change.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you said that, because when I was practicing law, people would come to me and their lives were a complete train wreck. And they expected me to fix it by Tuesday at 2 p.m. at their violation of probation hearing. All right, so you've spent the last 2, sometimes 3 decades of your life making every possible worst decision. And then it's my fault when when I can't just make it better. Change is a process. Sometimes something will happen to us which is very abrupt. Let's say somebody you love dies very suddenly, or let's say you lose your job, or recently like Hurricane Ian destroyed the area around Fort Myers, Sanibel Island, Pine Island, and that is where change is inflicted upon you.
Yeah.
And so the question then is, how do you react to the change? And I really like what you brought up, Dr. Pat. You said, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you said,
go ahead.
I tried to get people to go through the door, and so now finish that.
Well, how often has somebody said to you, you could bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink? That never made sense to me. What do I know about horses? I don't know if you bring a horse to water, whether they're going to drink or not. But how many times have you tried to pull somebody through a doorway that they absolutely didn't want to go through? And I'm using the metaphor of a doorway because I really do believe in passages when it comes to change. And, why do you want to do that? Okay, so Mark, here's the deal. You brought up the work that I do with women in recovery, and some men, by the way. I do work with men in recovery as well. But here's what I've learned. I have stood up in court with the attorneys, with my person standing next to me. We have showed up in the court after smacking into 3 cars down the road, somehow not remembering where your dog went, but we're now there again. And I have stood there and I've known 2 things. One, I can't pull you through the door, but I can show you the door. That's why I'm there with you. And the other thing is I can detach from the outcome I want, but never detach from hope. And I see that's what we're talking about today. It's really okay to detach from an outcome or a change, even for yourself, but don't ever detach from hope.
That's a very, very fascinating statement. And if we look at the very root of all belief systems, Adam and Eve, which to me is a metaphor. All right, when they, because I mean, I don't want to get into to why I feel that way, but biting into the apple, the tree of knowledge, it changes them, and then they get cast out of paradise. In Greek mythology, there's the box that Pandora opens, and all the evils and woes of the world come flying out of it. And then the last thing that emerges from that box is hope. And in both of those stories, which are metaphors for people's behavior and the fact that life is filled with challenges and difficult things, the one thing you must never abandon, and you hit it right, the nail right on the head, is hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, I think you said it. Can I just go back? And I want to remind everybody, this is a live call-in show. I know Jacob is going to be answering the phones. I want to just make sure I give out the number. I just got a text message from somebody. I was just trying to type and read it. 1-800-930-2819. Or if you go over to Facebook.com/Transformation Talk Radio, we're also over there as well. Mark, here's the thing I want to get back to and what you said. There are a lot of things out there about the word change, but I couldn't find a statement that says change or be changed, because I think in the world, it may be a concept that needs a little bit talking about.
I
Okay?
agree.
A
I
little bit
agree
more
with that.
discussion.
Yes.
But the reality of it is, even if you don't think there is a need for you to change, you are changing as we speak. It's happening. Every day, we are in a human form that doesn't know how not to change itself. By the essence of who we are, we are not robotics. We are in a form. And every day this form has to evaluate what's going on here, and it makes adjustments where it can, and you don't even know it. And that is a change that's happening to you. And how that change occurs, even if we take the simplistic version of our bodies, how that change happens is where you get to have the input. What am I trying to say? What am I trying to say? If you know that you are allergic to gluten and you are just looking at that piece of delicious Italian bread that looks like your mama made or somebody in your family made, or Luigi's Bakery that was down the street on East Tremont Avenue down there in the Bronx made, and you're looking at that thing and all of a sudden you got a childhood memory and you see it. And the first slice goes into that bread and you hear the crust. You could hear that beautiful knife cut through that delicious golden crust. And then the butter's already out there, and they got the butter and they're starting to butter the bread. And you are thinking, I could just have that one piece. And you totally forget the impact that eating that piece of bread will have.
I'm so hungry right now.
I know. I'm just like,
I was like, what do you,
I'm like,
Dr.
I'm like,
the
oh my
butter and the
God.
crunch.
I went back to East Tremont Avenue back there. but this is where you're at. Change or be changed. Now look, the change point for you is you understand your body and yourself more than you ever have. Right?
Right.
You are either going to have that bread or you're not. If you have the bread, then you absolutely know what the outcome's going to be. No control over it. You're going to put it in your body. You're going to go to bed at night. You're not even going to think about how delicious that bread was, because somewhere in the middle of the night, your body is going to start to change. And it is changing without your control. and all of a sudden your stomach hurts. And the next dot, 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 fill in the blank. But today's show isn't about that. Today is about how you do this, what I call choice in hope. That's it. It's choice in hope. This is when you realize I'm in the hope zone and I'm going to make a decision today. And maybe it's not a great day. Maybe my house was just lost. Maybe. But what will you find and what can you do? That's what Mark's going to help with. Because if there's a message that's going to come through Mark, what is the message? Is it the message that you're going to be open to that's going to take you on a path that's going to change your life for good? Or is it going to be something else, Mark?
And interpreting the message, and this for the benefit of the listeners, Dr. Pat is so good at interpreting messages, because a lot of times, some of the things that I get that I deliver to people, they immediately recognize, but sometimes spirits give more of a metaphor or an advisory message, and the person receiving it, they're the center of the cyclone.
Yeah.
And they're so mired in it. And Dr. Pat will say, have you ever thought maybe you should look at that like this? And then all of a sudden, the recipient's like, oh my,
Yeah.
That's it. And so that's why this show helps people change or be changed. I was one of my favorite quotes on change is, of course, from Gandhi: be the change you wish to see in the world. So many people say, well, I wish people would be nicer. Okay, well, then start by you being nicer. I wish this planet wasn't so polluted. Well, then don't throw paper cups and plastic bottles on the ground. I mean, it starts with the self. And when we start individually changing, then collectively we begin to influence other people, and then change occurs. But whether we want to change or not, I mean, how many times has I'm asking this to the listeners, but also to you, Dr. Pat, have you gone back to some place that you haven't been since you were, a kid?
Oh my
and
God.
You say, God, it's changed so much, like it was supposed to be frozen in time. Well, I remember that show, Frasier. I loved Frasier. And the father, he took Frasier and his brother Niles fishing, and they went to this cabin on some lake. And Niles walks in. No, the father walks in and goes, wow, it hasn't changed a bit. And Niles walks in and goes, it hasn't changed a bit. and you have the same statement made in two very different ways.
Yeah.
And so that's also how you have to look at change.
Yeah. I want to talk about you and the tour too, though. So I want to ask you this question, because you didn't really say much about it, but you just talked about it in the context of Ian. So I just want to pull it out of that statement, because you've been doing a lot of things. You've been busy. You've been touring. You have a fabulous book. Again, we'll make sure people know. But here's the thing I've learned, and I don't know. God, I'm doing a lot of reflecting as we're building things out. So part of what my question is, every day I speak with either a listener or one of our hosts, I change. See, my job is to help them change, to help build a brand, to help write a book, to help. But I can't think of a single conversation I've had, good, bad, indifferent, or ugly, where it hasn't changed me. How did this tour change you, Mark?
Oh, quite a bit, because not only was I a keynote speaker, but I had the benefit of listening to other keynote speakers, and they bring up things that get me thinking about my approach to life and to certain things. I was so excited at the conference I spoke at last weekend was the Edgar Cayce ARE, Association for Research and Enlightenment, their Ancient Mysteries Conference. And a couple of the other speakers were just really, really fantastic. And one of them, John Van Alken, he's with Edgar Cayce, and he leads their tour groups to Egypt and to several sites around the world. And he was talking about the Lost Ark. And, you know, we all think of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, but he was explaining the spiritual aspects of the ark and how, according to legend, there was like this fire, this all-consuming fire that would appear above it. And he was describing electromagnetic energy. And then he led everyone on a meditation where you immerse yourself in this fire of change.
Yeah.
And it was really, really quite revealing.
Yeah.
And so the lost ark, in one sense, it's an object, it's a thing. In another, it's a metaphor for taking the wisdom within us and bringing it out, and through that affecting change.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, that was one of those aha moments.
Yeah. You know, there's a change that we did a show on. I want to bring it up if we could. Yes, we are taking your callers. This is a live call-in show for those of you that are just so engrossed in what we're saying. 1-800-930-2819. I have to tell you what happened based on the last show. We had 2 callers call in from Italy. Do you remember?
I do. I
Yeah,
do.
okay. And it was some ungodly hour over in Italy. And I believe first the daughter called in, and I'm not going to mention any names, but then
Right.
we got a second call. Why was that important to me? How did that hit me after the show? So I'll just tell you. So you think you're doing a show, people think we get on here and they don't matter. You all matter to us. Mark and I do this show. Mark does a lot of other things in the world, and you matter. You know, the reason that he and I show up is because you matter. We could have picked another profession, by the way. As a matter of fact, I was reminded of that today. I think Rocky's got to mute herself, but Rocky just can't wait. We should have Rocky in on this. But one of the things that I was struck by is, man, it made me stop in my tracks, Mark. It made me, I stopped. And I thought about all the years I used to doubt myself. And trust me, everybody, when I say dialing a wrong phone number in 2003 and pulling out a credit card and charging close to $17,000 for internet only radio in 2003, after graduating from a school with honors, award-winning dissertation, postdoctoral research, the cream of the crop job offers from any consulting firm. And my choice was not to hang up, buy airtime, and start in a direction that I didn't even understand. Now, I had a moment after that call. We have the best listeners on the planet. And the moment I had after that call, it took me back, Mark. What did you say when you go back? It took me back to some of the early years. The show, by the way, was not the Dr. Pat show. Thank you to all of the listeners. I think it was Susie. I can't remember if it was Susie or Jackie that called into the show one day and didn't call the show what its name was, Crust Busting Your Way to an Awesome Life, and accidentally called in and said, have I reached the Dr. Pat show? And I'm like, I guess you have. Okay, why am I bringing this up? If you don't think that I don't wake up or Mark doesn't wake up, maybe in the middle of the night in a hot sweat, wondering, am I doing okay here? Is this what I meant to do? And part of today's show for all of you is to say you're going to get false evidence. What is that acronym? False for fear, false evidence of what? I have my own acronym, but I can't say the word on here.
False evidence appearing real. And I agree with that to a limited extent.
To a limited extent. But I just want to say it. False evidence. The false evidence is the stuff that goes on between your ears sometimes. And when you take a journey that seems uncharacteristic to every part of your life, everybody around you, but you know in your heart and you know in your gut, and maybe you call into a show like this because you don't trust it much, and you get some help and some guidance. And I want to tell you, for me, that show and those 2 callers brought me back, I think, to 2004, when I doubted everything I was doing. And I was ready to walk away from this, Mark. Do you know what happened to me? 6
No.
months. Okay. April 1st of 2004, April Fool's Day. I was ready to hang up the towel. Had too much pressure from my partner, wasn't making money, turning down like $250,000 consulting offers, right? I even turned down teaching. The universe looked at me and said, no, you're not. No, you didn't. Bonnie Barnard and I are teaching a course, Live Your Greatest Dream, full day deal. My right ankle swelled up to the size of a soccer ball. And I went off on a journey to figure out what the mystery disease was. That spread to my whole body. I never talked about it on air. But here's what I want to tell you before we go to break, Mark. And I want to hear, I know you got stories like this.
Oh, yeah.
I know you do. Here's what I want to hear from you when you come back. There was nothing else I could do in the world except buy airtime. And that's what I did. KKNW all of a sudden popped out. They had 5 hours. I couldn't walk. My body was in pain. Now, what can we help you with to make sure, y'all, you don't enter that much doubt on your life's pathway? Because I'm telling you, if you can avoid a mystery disease, Mark's going to tell you about it when we come back. Let's take a short break, everyone. Hey, everybody, come on, give us a shout. Jacob's also going to take your questions from Facebook. We're going to bring it on right now, 1-800-930-2819. We're taking your calls. Please, please be patient with us as the phone rings. Don't hang up. If you call back, we're going to get you in there. Little Menahuni in the, not just our telephone system, but you know, whenever we have like something spectacular that goes on, that's either global or worldwide, something about these wires get crossed. Mark, for a minute, we talked about the tour, but that is not quite enough. How do people find out where you're going, what you're doing, how they work with you? I had somebody ask me, how do I book time with Mark? Give him the whole story.
Sure. Visit my website, which is afterlifefrequency.com. It's all one word, excuse me, all one word, afterlifefrequency.com. And that's just same as the name of my new book, the title of my new book, The Afterlife Frequency. And you can sign up for my newsletter. You can apply for a reading. There's also a section on the homepage for the psychic and the doc. And you'll see my calendar of events. And every week, the psychic and the doc and other things that I'm involved with are coming up. I just finished, we had 3 cities, Phoenix, where I did Helping Parents Heal. And that's just such a beautiful organization because it's dedicated to doing just that, helping parents heal. And talk about change, Dr. Pat. Helping Parents Heal refers to parents who've lost a child as shining light parents. And they refer to them as shining light parents because it is an acknowledgement that the light of their child's energy, their spirit, their love shines in their heart as well as shines in eternity from the other side. And I thought that is such a beautiful term as opposed to bereaved parent. I mean, bereaved parent sounds so generic, but shining light parent is much more accurate. And then I spoke at the International Association for Near-Death Studies, their annual conference, and that was in Salt Lake City. And that was a very interesting place to visit. And then just last weekend, I was in Virginia Beach at the Edgar Cayce Association for Research and Enlightenment for their Ancient Mysteries Conference. So I gave 3 very different talks at all venues. And it's always nice interfacing with the other speakers and certainly meeting the attendees as well. And in between all that, had to deal with Hurricane Ian. So it has been, talk about change. It has just been illuminating. It's been frustrating because of the hurricane. And I'm working on an article for Best Holistic Life magazine. Dr. Pat and I have co-authored an article for Best Holistic Life magazine, and I write every month, and people can get a free online subscription at bestholisticlife.com. And the article that I'm working on now, which will come out in February, is about when things that you take for granted are suddenly taken away.
Oh, yeah.
And the way I got the idea for this article is I was sitting in my house with no air conditioning, no lights. And so I went out into my garage and I got a folding table and set it up. And I had a little bit of juice left in my laptop. And I just started writing what I was feeling about when, one moment we're taking for granted all these things. And I thought that just a few generations ago, this was the norm. People didn't have microwave ovens. You didn't take a cup of water, put it in a box, magically press a button, and presto, it bubbles with people didn't have climate control. I mean, can you imagine living in Florida before air conditioning or mosquito control?
Oh,
And so suddenly my life changed when a horrific hurricane came through and took out the power. And I've been in this situation before. I mean, that was the 17th hurricane that I've lived through. And it's funny, Dr. Pat, Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing
Yeah.
over and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
Why do I live here?
Yeah. Well, change or be changed, Mark. But look, my mom and my family moved down to Florida, and there was nothing anybody was going to say. And it was fascinating to watch because they loved it down there. My mom thrived. She's a Southern woman, and she found her footings. Got a real estate license, her banker's license. I mean, she did all that. And then Hurricane Andrew, and they lived in Homestead. Now, if you don't know where Homestead is, it's south of Miami. And what I saw happen from Andrew, I couldn't believe it. Now, why did my mom stay? That's another story for another show. But one of the few houses that did not blow down, gotta love Anthony, few houses that did not blow down is my brother's. Because when he bought his house, he said, I'm buying a cinder block house. And everybody around him was building, and my brother's house is cinder block the right word? You know what I mean? The
it is.
Gray blocks. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And yet, this is a situation where my mom's life was changed.
Right.
But what she did is she stayed down there, and I said, Mom, come on and move. I can move you up here. It doesn't matter what you do. We can just, She said, no. And I said, why? And this is the moral to the story I told you about April 1st. She said in a very sweet Southern voice, she said, honey, you know what I told you girls? Now I know why the good Lord put me down here. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be good. I've heard her do this preaching thing to us girls for a really long time. But I said this, she is not going to get me on this one. There is nothing my mama could say to me to have me believe that she is about to say something to me that's going to make any sense at all. She lost everything. She said, yeah, I know what the good Lord put me down. I said, why is it? And I said, well, she said, well, wait a minute. Let me tell you, I know why the good Lord gave me my real estate license. I said, okay, yeah. She said, oh, right. She said, I know why. I'm very clear about that. And I said, okay, what has that got to do? Tell me, why did you get it? She said, because I am going to help these people build their homes again.
Wow.
She said, I was put down here. Nothing else in my life matters. I'm not leaving here. I have something that a lot of people don't have. I can help them find homes. I can help them build homes. I can help them buy homes. Wow. I wish I had 10% of her wisdom.
I think you do.
I think I have 10. I think I have about 10.
I think you have more than that.
But that helped me though, Mark. I mean, that upbringing helped me realize, because I started to ask myself the question, okay, God, spirit, universe, Why? Why? And then I got the answer, because I couldn't do anything, Mark, not a single thing. I could barely walk. All I could do is go through my life savings, buy airtime, and be happy for a bunch of hours a day doing a show called Crust Busting Your Way to an Awesome Life. It didn't make a bit of sense, just like it didn't make sense for the mama to stay down there, but it didn't make sense to people. So, what happens when you follow that flow? What happens when you follow it? Are you going to be faced with doubt? Mark, come on. How much doubt
Oh,
were you faced with?
a lot. And I have to add something real quick when you're
Yeah.
talking about rebuilding the house.
Yeah.
After Hurricane Andrew, which
Oh,
was back in the 90s, and that was, I think Ian was as bad as Hurricane Andrew in the devastation. All the building codes changed, and it became not so much a joke, but more of a thing in Florida that all contractors need to read the story, The Three Little Pigs, because which of the pigs' houses withstood the huff and puff was the house made out of bricks. And everything changed because on the barrier islands to so many miles inland, the basic structure has to be made out of cinder block. Now I've noticed things are starting to get slack again, because now I'm seeing particle board structures and all that. And it's like, no, no, no.
yeah.
You can't do this in the tropics. You have to have stone, or rather cinder block structures to withstand these things. But getting back to your second question or your second point about the doubt, I have a lot of people asking, how could you possibly leave the practice of law to go be a medium? Well, first off, I always was a medium. It's just that I was embracing it. And I may have said this story before, but I was working for a government agency, and my first book, Never Letting Go, came out, and I brought Rocky on board as my manager, and she got me a speaking tour in New York City and then Boston. And the first stop in New York City, I mean, she scored and got me on an MSNBC show called The Docket, and it was really cool, being there at 30 Rock, and they were filming some stuff for Saturday Night Live next to the studio that we were in. So that was all very, very cool. And it was right before Christmas. So, we got Christmas in New York. And then we went to Boston, and she got me a gig speaking at Harvard about afterlife and signing my book. Well, I get a call from the elected official that I work for, and he said that I'm catching too much flack from a certain political party, that I have a psychic on board. And I said, well, you did hire me not because I'm a psychic, but because of my experience in managing law firms. And he said, yeah, well, it's causing me all types of problems. And I said, yeah, but I also have a First Amendment right to my belief system, which should not be questioned. And then he said, well, you're taking too much time off. I said, actually, I'm taking vacation time off to promote my book. I said, but I'll make this easier for you. And Pat, this was one of those defining moments in my life. It just hit me, just like you, with, you picked up the phone that day, and next thing you know, you're hitting up the credit card. I said, I'll make it easy for you. Please accept this as my resignation.
Yeah.
And he goes, okay. And I'm like, oh my God, I just quit the practice of law.
I know.
Yeah. But Rocky said, well, look around, Mark. Where are you? I said, Harvard.
Yep.
And what are you doing in an hour, Mark? I said, giving a lecture on life after death and signing copies of my new book. She said, don't you think this is exactly where you need to be? And that's what happened with you too, Dr. Pat.
Yeah, it did.
It's synchronicity. Do you think it was just some random chain of events? Exactly.
No. And you know why that's an important thing for me to bring up today is because, I look at some of the hiccups in my life today, and there are some that will derail me. And they'll derail me maybe for an hour. Some will derail me for a day. Some will derail me longer. But when it comes to whether or not this is what I'm supposed to do, the network is our pathway, what we're doing in the world. Whenever something comes up like that, I have to go back to that memory. Because if there was ever going to be a time for me to get off of the rails, to discontinue what I started. There would have been 4 times in this journey over a 20-year period. Here's what they are. 2004, the mystery disease, but it didn't. What it did is it changed the direction of the show. I then had to look into, how do I get some other kind of healing? The nature of the show changed. I think 6 months later, I had that caller call into the show. The show wasn't called the Dr. Pat Show. It was called Crust Busting. They said, have I reached the Dr. Pat Show? And Benny says, yep, I guess you have. The whole brand changed. Then we moved on. I didn't get well. It took me 10 years. 10 years. Thank you, Dr. Darvish. Thank you, Dr. Overman. Thank you, Dr. Nushin Darvish, best naturopaths on the planet. We took on the government. We took on other things to get at the bottom of this. Thank you, Dr. Ronnie. And then here we go. 2007, 8, and 9, and 10. Nobody wants to talk about the trauma from those years. It's slip it under the rug. Families were destroyed. My buddy was a best-selling author and he was living out of a tent in Sacramento. But what happened with us? An opportunity to start Transformation Talk Radio out of the blue because somebody else wrote a bad check. And if you are a station owner on the East Coast and you get a bad check, you're going to hunt down the person that set that person up for you. And so Chris calls me. He says, I got to pay a mortgage. You have to send me a check for $2,200. Within 3 months, the network was launched, the technology was built, and we had 40 hosts. So here we go with COVID. Now, I'm only talking about the big things. Believe me, my life is full of a lot of other crazy things. But then comes COVID. What happens during COVID? What do? We're like everybody else. We struggled. We were hard pressed to get good producers. We had to figure out how to expand and change our technology. Did we have doubt? But what happens, Mark, is every time you're ready to throw in the towel, some idea or sign shows up. I know that's the way you live your life.
Yeah, I do. And it's just amazing when you look back and you realize that all of these things were part of a bigger plan. And, there's people that say, oh, no, life is just happen chance. There's no way. And what COVID did is you already had the Transformation Network. It was happening. There was radio and KKNW and all these other stations. And things have been going over to video, to live stream, but COVID just rammed that right down the path. Yep. Because, now pretty much, I'd say most radio shows are now being live streamed. We are technically, we used to call this an internet TV show. Now it's a live stream show. And yes, it's radio, but it is television as well. So COVID changed everything. And the change was the technological fallout from it. Yeah. So yes, a lot of horrible things. 1 million Americans alone perished from COVID. You still have the deniers, and if you want to deny science and technology, that is your choice. Stupid. But the thing is, it has also led to people relying more on video technology for us to communicate. And actually,
people that would have never touched a computer, almost every, my friend says almost every assisted living place had to redo their whole deal. They'd like one computer. No, but I love what you're saying because it happened again. And it happened last week. What happened last week? See, I had this thought that in order for us to get to a TV platform, a Roku, a live streaming Ions Plus, there was a lot of things that had to happen. And in my mind, the last time I checked with pretty much the #1 top company, I won't mention their name yet, they were not in the price point. We've had 3 meetings with them. 3 of the meetings, the vice president was on the meeting. And the last meeting we had, they made their presentation. They showed me an example. And then they showed me their price point. And the initial price point they gave me for 1 year, I didn't panic. See, that's what happens when you're in the flow. I looked at it and I did the math. And I said, for that amount of money, you're going to give us 5 channel support and all the apps. And then I said, well, wait a minute, let me do the math. Okay, let's take 5, divide it into that. Of course, Jessica had to do the math. And then I said, now, Jessica, take that number and divide it minimally into 20 hosts per channel. The fee to put us on TV was less than $1,000 per host. Hello?
Wow.
Every thought I had. And when they showed us their platform that is just spectacular, it took me to a different place. I immediately hired 4 producers. Now, believe me, it took 2 months to interview these 4 guys.
Oh, I'm sure.
And there was, in my heart, I know we would not be able to move forward. There's only so much Jacob can do. But talk about that in the time we have left. Because sometimes, Mark, we think a door is shut. But is that really a door that's shut? Or is the door shut for us to take a breath and even trust greater?
There's an old Taoist saying, when one door closes, another door opens.
And don't let it hit you in the butt.
And don't let it hit you in the butt. Exactly.
I made that up.
Well, I know, but that's sort of the New York spin on it, which I like. But sometimes that door closing in your face is absolutely necessary. And I look at so many things that happened to me in the practice of law, like the super big firms didn't want to hire me for whatever reason, or this firm didn't. So I formed my own firm. All right. And then I transitioned out of that to a government agency, which led to me transitioning out of that into doing my mediumship work full time. And the thing is, that's what happened with you. You formed your own network. And sometimes when people say, well, nobody will hire me, or the door's always shut in my face, that's the universe telling you perhaps you should be your own business, your own entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I got to tell a funny story.
Yeah, go ahead.
We had another great loss this week, Angela Lansbury. I mean, talk about a 75-year career in films and television. But about 3 weeks ago, I think it was, Louise Fletcher died. And Louise Fletcher won an Academy Award for playing the evil nurse Ratchet in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh my God.
With Jack Nicholson. And then later in her career, she was cast in Star Trek Deep Space Nine as this religious figure, Kai Wynn, and she was a religious fanatic, and she was real evil. Well, I was at this party. I was invited to a VIP reception for all these Trek actors. And I walk in, and all these people are, they're surrounding, like Nichelle Nichols and George Takei was there, and a couple other. And Louise Fletcher had been invited, and she's sitting there all by herself. Nobody's talking to her. And I'm like, oh my God, that's Louise Fletcher. So I walked up to her and I said, hi, I don't mean to disturb you. She goes, well, young man. She goes, have a seat right here. So I started talking to her, and she was amazing, bubbly, happy, funny. And I said to her, I go, Miss Fletcher, you're the nicest, sweetest person I think I've ever met, yet you play the most sinister, diabolical characters. And all of a sudden, Dr. Pat, she changed, and her eyes got really intense, and she leaned over to me and she said, well, it's got to be in there somewhere, doesn't it, Mark? And I'm like, oh my God. And she goes, gotcha. And I was laughing, and all I thought was, that is why she won an Academy Award.
Right.
She went from being like the sweetest grandmother ever into Nurse Ratchet. And she was laughing, and she said, well, that's acting. You have to find these emotions, these turmoil. Yeah. And when you look at somebody like that, you can't just grab that out of thin air. You had to have a lot of hurt, a lot of pain.
Yeah.
You talk to very accomplished actors when they break down and cry as a role. And I was talking to this one actor, and he said, "Yeah, I thought about when I saw my mother laying there dead." He goes, "That's what triggers that."
Mm,
And so you look at somebody and say, "Wow, what an incredible actor." But it was the pain,
yeah.
it was the change in their
Yeah.
life that brought them to this. And I'm saying that for the benefit of everybody. Terrible things happen to people. Bad things happen to good people. People say, "Well,
Mhm.
why me?" The thing is, why not you? And
Yeah.
you can either collapse under the weight of it, be a victim, or you can change.
Yeah.
It's how you react to the situation that defines who we are.
I love it. You know, Mark, I watched, and we have a minute left. I'm just going to say it quick. I was a huge Sinead O'Connor fan, loved her music because I was like angry Sinead O'Connor. I even cut my hair, one of the downsizing thing. She has got to be close to one of the most misunderstood artists of my generation. She has a special on either HBO or Showtime. I encourage people to watch that special because what you'll find out about her and what she went through and why she stood on Saturday Night Live and tore up a picture for the Pope had less to do about spirituality, religion, her belief in Jesus, but more about a system was that was yet to be uncovered for what it was doing. And when I watched that, I had no idea the abuse she went through growing up. I mean, what she did didn't turn me away from her. I did think her timing was a little off. But see, even those moments where I had an open mind to watch it, I cried. And then I understood the words in her song. And when she sings, Nothing Compares to You, and that drop is coming from her eye, that teardrop, she is truly crying about her mother. What was my disappointment, Mark? That the Prince Foundation refused to let her play Nothing Compares to You on that special. Why? I don't know. Yes, he wrote it. She sang it. But just sometimes we got to really get past some of the stuff that's killing us, don't you think?
I think so. And um, people like Sinead O'Connor, John Lennon, you go down the list, Edgar Allan Poe, Ernest Hemingway, they took all their pathos and all the terrible things and they turned it into an art form. And if you think about it, many great works of art, literature, and music are the result of pain.
Yeah.
You study the life of Michelangelo and the agony and the pain that he went through, and look at the breathtakingly beautiful pieces of work that we're still in awe of 500 years later. So yeah, bad things are going to happen to people. And I'm looking at what's going on on Facebook, and so many people are saying this show is absolutely what I needed to hear. Another person, Felice, said, "My experience is the universe and your knowing will keep getting louder until you pay attention." Thank you, Felice. Somebody else said, loving this show. So, we're not getting call-ins, but I think what's happening is people are listening to this and saying, yeah, that's what's happening to me. And we the
Yeah.
psychic and the doc, we are gonna be back next week,
Yeah.
and it is gonna be a call-in show.
Yeah.
Um, unless Mother Nature wants to fling another hurricane at me. I'm hoping not. People are like, "Well, you're a medium. You should know that." It's like, yes, well, I'm a medium, not a meteorologist. And but the thing is, I'm glad that everybody, the feedback that we're getting
Yeah.
online is so positive, and I'm glad that what Dr. Pat is sharing and what I'm
Yeah.
sharing is helping a lot of people. And we're going to be back next week, and we will be taking your calls because the psychic and the doc are
Mhm.
on call.
And I will be salivating for at least 24 hours about the piece of Italian bread with the crusty crust and the delicious butter that I don't have. I am going to be salivating that as I eat something here that is so gluten-free, I might even skip it. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jacob. We'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into The Psychic and the Doc with Mark Anthony and me, Dr. Pat Baccili, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Hey, look, come back next week so we can explore with you more of life's many challenges and learn from fascinating guests. And you know what? Even Mark and me. We'll connect you and discover insights from people in this life and from the afterlife. Extraordinary problems? Yeah, they do. They require extraordinary solutions. But step into the world of possibilities with us on The Psychic and the Doc. That's every Thursday, 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern time, right here on TransformationTalkRadio.com. That's TransformationTalkRadio.com. And don't forget, we're also live face-to-face on Facebook.com, Transformation Talk Radio.